Hi, I'm Lori Jones, President and CEO of Avocet Communications and host of StrategyCast. Join me and my guests, innovators, disruptors, and visionaries, as we explore bold and brave marketing strategies that help you transform, scale, and grow your brand. On this episode of StrategyCast, I am joined by Karrie Sanderson, CMO at LiveRamp. Karrie is a marketing powerhouse who went from engineering to building iconic brands like Coca-Cola and Brawny to the world of B2B SaaS marketing. Her journey is one of reinvention, grit, and bold strategy, including lessons learned during a sailing sabbatical that reshaped her approach to marketing. Karrie dives into how marketers can overcome blind spots, why brand strategy is essential for growth, and how to stay agile in a fast-changing market. Get ready for inspiration and real-world insights.
A competitive edge starts with strategy, and strategy starts with knowing how to develop one. StrategyCast is a leading marketing podcast that serves up strategic insights, trends, and tips to help separate your business from the pack. Tune in weekly as host Lori Jones interviews bold marketing leaders who have priceless wisdom and are willing to share. Each episode explores cutting-edge approaches that have proven instrumental in transforming brands into industry trailblazers.
Welcome to StrategyCast. I'm absolutely thrilled to have Karrie Sanderson join the show today. Welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Lori. I'm really excited to be here.
I love the topic that we're talking about today. And you've got an incredible background on how CPG has really informed what you're doing today, which is all about B2B marketing. Before we dive into that, tell us a little about your incredible journey, by the way, big brand journey, and why you're doing what you're doing today.
Yeah, so I am an engineer by education, but quickly found my way into marketing via an executive training program. I had a rotation in marketing and realized I loved it. And so that's where I stayed. Had the fortune to work for CPG products, everything from Brawny paper towels, the lovely Brawny man, Coca-Cola for beverages, Starbucks for beverages. I spent 10 years in pharma. I worked at Pfizer. Took a little bit of a sailing sabbatical with my family. When I came back, I had an opportunity to jump into the wonderful world of B2B SaaS. And so I've been doing that for almost 10 years now and absolutely love it, all of its wonderful things and challenges, which I think we'll be talking about today.
Yeah, we absolutely will. And I love that you talked about that journey and also that you mentioned the sailing journey, because I find my quiet time is where I do my best thinking. And it was a huge juxtaposition in your career at that time from big, big, big brand and the pressure, the big pressure that goes along with that to startup.
Yes.
What did that sailing provide you, mind, body, and soul?
Yeah, I think a few things. So I am the primary breadwinner in my family. I'm fortunate my husband was a stay-at-home dad. So our relationship with our children. So first of all, personally, my kids knew me from weekends and vacations. But when we went on that sailing trip, they were 9 and 12 at the time. I had an opportunity to really get to know them like 24/7, to switch my roles, to be their homeschool teacher, to go on adventures with them. And I think that was the most important thing, was just solidifying the relationship that I have with my children at a critical age when they start to kind of pull away. From a career perspective, though, I think a couple words that come to mind. Number one, resourcefulness. When you're on a sailboat and you're far away from anywhere that an Amazon truck might be able to deliver, or you can just run to the store and get whatever you need, when something breaks or something goes wrong, you have to improvise. You got to figure it out, right? You're there, you're within your own, usually you or whatever's available from any boats that may be near you. So I think the resourcefulness kind of re-sparked for me in terms of being scrappy, figuring things out. And I think that set me up really well for the switch into startup SaaS world, because in many cases, much of what we do, especially for marketing, you need to be resourceful and scrappy.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. How did your time in CPG really, shape your strategic thinking about brand development for these scrappier brands?
Yeah. So one of the most fortunate things, I don't have an MBA. I have a master's in engineering. I don't have an MBA, but I feel like I got an MBA when I joined
Good.
Coca-Cola. Yeah. Coca-Cola, they take brand very seriously. One of the most ubiquitous brands, consumer brands, everlasting brands, 100 and some years old in the world, like globally. When you join their company as a marketer, they bring you to Atlanta for, several weeks and then refreshing, where they teach you about the foundations of brand architecture, about the intrinsic and extrinsic way to look at brands, to think about emotional and functional benefits, how to architect that and communicate that internally first. And that's how that shows up externally. And so for me, that was a phenomenal opportunity to really practice. They brought in brand experts who really kind of taught us about the fundamentals. So everybody in that company, all the marketers in that company, really understood how to and spoke the same language about brand and the importance of brand as every experience the customer has with you and your product. So that was ingrained in me early on in my career, and I've pulled that through. The other piece about brand that I learned from CPG is starting with consumer insight, right? I am usually not the target audience of what I'm selling. So how do we make sure that we're really deeply digging into what consumers are looking for, what pain points and problem they're having, and how can we then make sure that we're continuously thinking about that throughout the entire relationship with the customer?
Yeah. When you started to move into these additional, early stage brands, what really stood out to you as perhaps being off?
Yeah, I think it was off or maybe even missing or different, I would say. The world of SaaS is so, especially in the startup side of things, you're just busy trying to get information. I had this spark, I had this idea, is it really working? And and the time is spent more on the product, right? Especially if it's a PLG product where you're thinking about that viral growth and how one thing leads to another. And it's easy to put things like who we want to be and who we want to stand for, like what we want to stand for, who are we for, not just the demographics, but the emotional side of things. It's easier to put those things off till later. But at some point, your company reaches a point of scale where the institutional knowledge or water cooler conversations are not going to cut it. And the brand will start to kind of fray off at the edges, and the experience that customers will have are not necessarily the ones you want them to have. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing that was, you and I talked about this when we first chatted, is the separation of product from marketing. So in the CPG world, if you are a brand manager, you own the P&L, you own everything from what product am I developing all the way down through how it goes to market and then making sure the sales team is equipped. So that was an interesting learning for me, that marketing and product were separated when I went into the B2B SaaS world. I think there's lots of reasons for it, obviously technical considerations, how we build, but to me, that in relationship between product and marketing are as important as the one between marketing and sales.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Are you seeing any of that change with so many shifts with CPG marketers really needing the tech space? Are you able to bring more of those functional lessons to the table?
Yeah, I think it depends upon the company, right? If it's a very hard row to hoe if you are a marketer who's joining a company where there's not a recognition of that strong partnership to begin with, because you will spend a lot of your initial year, maybe more, sometimes more of your time fighting for a seat at the table, explaining why, as a strategic thinker, you are really thinking about the customer experience from before they have become a customer, all the way through that long-term relationship trying to build. Marketing plays a role throughout that whole journey. If you're joining an organization where that's not necessarily recognized, you've got to first have somebody understand the problem, and then you have to try to fix it. So it depends upon your appetite as a marketer and what you're willing to do. I've been fortunate that in the time that I've spent in SaaS, I have worked for leaders who already had that understanding. My first role was at Smartsheet, and I was actually brought in by the chief product officer. And he and I had a chance to work together for 7 years at Coca-Cola. He'd gotten into tech before me. And then when he joined there, realized, we need the kind of that brand thinking and that marketing brand thinking that will play throughout the whole product. So throughout the whole experience.
Do you think that fundamentally B2B companies misjudge the value of brand? Is that why they're thinking about it too late, or not gaining the insights needed, or not including marketing on the product team early enough?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in a lot of CMO communities where we have this conversation quite frequently. And one of the things we talk about is that issue of the value of brand. Unfortunately, I think that the flow of a lot of B2B SaaS is that you start with the product, then you do some demand gen, and you get addicted to these numbers, which are super important, right? Revenue is super important, but they're short-term type motions that happen to kind of get that next lead or get that next, kind of demand gen motion going. But brand is for the long term, right? And so I think to be an effective marketer, you have to think about all the different time frames of which you need to be impactful, whether it's a short term, weekly things that you're doing, all the way to brand, which should be a long-term play that accrues over time. I would say that from a B2B SaaS perspective, the other piece is brand is viewed as a bucket, right? It's like a separate budget item. And I've never had that perspective. I've always had that, if you think about anything that you buy, there's a brand involved as a consumer. If you just step right out of, these are still humans that we're talking to in the buying committee or whatever. They have an affinity for things based on their experiences with them. So you can either control those experiences and make them deliberate and have them accrue to a value that you want to show that you bring as a product, or you can let them happen accidentally. And I will tell you, the first, where you're trying to manage them and curate them, is a much better path to long-term growth than letting them sort of happen.
Yeah, I love that. One of the things that I explain to a lot of our clients is, and what we uncover through the strategic process, is they're starting their program mid-funnel. They're not starting at top of funnel, where brand is really it is so important, right? I mean, sometimes, like you said, you can have small successes mid-funnel, but because developing brand is not an inexpensive line item, they just decide to skip it. And no matter what, you still have to come back and redo it. There's a classic story out there with a huge CPG brand, Coors. And they didn't feel they needed to market very, very early on. They had a huge, this is decades ago, right? They had a huge following, with a very, very localized market in the Rocky Mountain region. And, the big brands were really nipping at their heels. And so what they ended up having to do was launch a massive integrated brand-related communications program in the market that cost more, a decade downstream, than had they just done it right to begin with. And I guess that's my point here, is that so many brands are not starting out on the right foot because they're not investing in the need for brand.
Right. I did not know that example about Coors. I'm always good to have another example to kind of lean in and listen to. One of the things I do, in addition to my current role, is I advise startups. I had the wonderful opportunity to be a mentor in the Seattle Techstars program for a few years. They shut down, unfortunately, but I'm still pretty involved with many of the folks I met there. And my sweet spot in mentoring was talking to some of these very, very early stage, like pre-revenue founders who have that excitement. Think they figured out, like, I've got this great idea. I can't afford brand. And in their mind, they tend to know it's important, but they think that they need to have these huge budgets to do it. And I coach them all the time. No, you can put it on one page. Just think about, like, who we're for, not only demographically, but again, as I talked about earlier, emotionally, like, what pain are they in? What problem are you solving for them? Why should they choose you? What are some of your points of differentiation? And then what are some key messages or things that you want to be known for? How are you different? Write those words down. And if you don't know them, ask your customers or your potential
Exactly.
customers.
Ah,
And just the one pager, it makes them feel, I said that way when new people join, you've got a new engineer, you're talking to investors, whatever you're doing, you have this anchor that you can start from as you're starting to think about how you want to show up in the world. It will absolutely evolve,
it
just like the
will.
product
Yep.
evolves. But don't wait. Don't be like, oh, wait, I can't get to that. The longer you wait, to your point about cores, the harder it is and the more expensive it is. So if you're a startup out there listening and you're thinking like, I can't afford this, it's actually quite simple. You can find these templates anywhere in the world of AI. You can feed things in and have it help you articulate what you're trying to articulate. But that one pager should be a little bit of a North Star for how you want to show up in the world beyond your product itself.
Yeah, I agree. And like you said, brands evolve, but if you are always looking back at that North Star and making sure that things are still connected, day in and day out, emotionally, physically, everything with that, then you're going to set yourself up to succeed no matter what. Um, One thing that we talked about in the pre-show and we got really giddy over,
Mhm.
I'm excited about, and a topic that I love, and it kind of ties into some of the, brands starting mid-funnel instead of really top of funnel as well, is that brands launch in in product market fit instead of problem market fit.
Mhm.
They think they belong. They don't know the difference between
Right.
problem market fit and product market fit. They launch in product market fit, and they don't have the data, the insights, the feedback, the lessons, anything that they need to really launch the way a brand should be launched. There are a lot of errors. The messaging may not be right. They don't have the ICP nailed down because they hadn't spent the time with product with problem market fit. What They don't make the time for it.
Right.
They just skip it. What do you have to say to those individuals and how marketers can recognize that they might be entering a scenario where that is the case?
Yeah, it's again, I think it's stage dependent again, right? Like somehow the early stage folks have a bit of an opportunity or an advantage here because as you're trying to figure out where does my idea or inspiration or spark fit, I think that's the time when founders are really talking to customers a lot more, and so they can kind of get that feedback loop. The danger for early stage is you're talking to a lot of the same kind of people, right? You're talking to those early adopters, the ones who will be early in the curve. Are you spending enough time talking to people who say it's not for me? You would get like a almost a positive feedback loop can be a good thing and can be a dangerous thing. So at the startup stage, make sure you try to talk to a lot of folks who even you think the product might not be for them. Like validate that side of the problem in the equation as well. As you get further along in your journey, it becomes even more important because again, you can end up really in an echo chamber of people use my product for this use case. I'm going to go find more of those people who use that product for this use case. And it's sort of like internal validation without really understanding the full range of who are really the true competitors, who really could benefit and who might not. I find input from customers who think that I'm not right for them oftentimes more valuable than those who do. The other piece is don't just ask people what they think.
Mhm.
Watch what they do. And this is a little bit more expensive, but you don't need as big of a sample size. Someone will say, oh, sure, yeah, no problem. When I open up this new product of yours, I'm going to do this, this, and this. But actually talk to people and watch them and spend the time and to see the struggles, to understand what people really do in real time.
Yeah.
Because surveys and hypothetical questions, this was very true in CPG, are never what people actually do in behavior. Very rarely are they what they do in behavior. They have a different pattern when nobody's watching or they don't know who's asking.
Well, and to illustrate the importance of this, many enterprise brands, and quite frankly, I think SaaS really kind of wrote the book for the difference between problem, product, and
Yes.
the market fit categories. But when you reach enterprise and they've got a new module launch or a new product launch
Yeah.
or a new feature, whatever it might be, they go back to problem market fit to really develop the right strategy for that launch. So it really does, the practice of getting into that and having a clear recipe for what you need to know through that stage is only going to help.
Right. I think too now the markets are changing so quickly. SaaS products that were leading, market leaders are now being threatened and challenged with the advent of up and coming with what AI makes possible. So they're can get caught a little flat-footed as they try to adopt AI into their own products. And really going back to those fundamentals is going to be very important versus just throwing AI at what you already do.
Right.
Your product already does. Now, I know that's not, it's easier said than done, but it's a challenge for marketers as well, is we have to really think about the competitive landscape, right? How is our compete landscape changing, and what messaging do we have to think about if there's new capabilities that were not possible 3 or 4 years ago from people just self-serving and doing things on their own, or a new and up-and-coming competitor. So it's for the product team, but that should be a close information sharing with marketing so that they can quickly evolve new ICPs that might be coming, new channels that might be opening up, and new competitors you might want to think about.
Yeah. It's interesting. There's so many blind spots. We've talked about a few throughout the show today.
Yeah.
What are some thoughts that you have for the marketers listening today, and the CEOs for early stage companies as well, or a tech team, on some of the additional blind spots that they might need to be looking through or at in this particular very early stage that they might be in?
Yeah, I think blind spots can be, as I mentioned earlier, focusing a little bit too much on the customers you already have. How is the market evolving? Are there new segments or new use cases that you could be thinking about that your product could serve, especially if you are using AI to adopt your capabilities? And then really fast up and coming competitors. I had this happen at one of the categories that I was in recently, and there was we called it kind of an ankle biter, like, oh, they're small, they're just buying their way in, they're spending a lot of money on advertising, and they were focused more globally than US. So it was kind of like, oh, they're over there in EMEA, we're more US focused. And I will say that was a miss, that we didn't spend more time figuring out, because they grew so fast and so quickly. By the time we realized we needed to react, they were a formidable competitor.
Yeah.
And remain so today for that particular company. So yeah.
I tell you, it's a neat segue into this next section that we're going to talk about, and why marketing often gets the blame but not the power needed to really, really position the brand
Yeah.
and the product the way that it needs to be. And quite often, and if you're a funded startup, placing the value on marketing is a key insight for me in choosing to work with them. Is the funding
Yeah.
really, really going to go where it needs to go, or is it going in some of the wrong areas? And people, very early stage, quite often truly do, as we've noted several times today, undervalue not just the team and not just the role of brand and the role that a CMO plays, but truly the budget needed to get there.
Yeah.
Quite often, you've seen CMOs handed a title, but no team and no budget, which just sets them up for absolute failure left and right. What do you have to say about that?
I think that goes back to what I said earlier on, is as a CMO, what appetite do you have for educating internally about the importance? And so asking those questions up front, if you're looking at a new role, really understanding, digging in. I mean, as a CMO, you should be able to see, like, when I interviewed for my CMO role, I was like, I want to talk to everyone in the leadership team. I really want to talk to the CFO to get their perspective on where they think investment should be. But there's some people who thrive on the idea of teaching and educating the importance of brand and how that fits into an overall marketing discipline. And so for those folks, they're probably fine. They don't mind trying to share and show what they can do. If you're someone who finds yourself in that position, there's ways that you can test into it, right? You don't have to go, it's not a 0 or 100, it's not all or nothing game or play or approach. So one thing you can do is say, hey, let's pick a couple of markets and a couple of ICPs and let's overlay it to our existing demand gen, have a couple control markets. Make sure you give yourself enough time and say, we're going to do some pure awareness plays over the top, whatever that may be, whatever makes sense for your brand. Maybe it's some targeted ABM or something like that. But being able to show the impact of how sustained awareness and sustained doesn't and awareness doesn't have to be expensive, right? You can do some social media campaigns, you can do some sponsored, posts and things like that to kind of show how having that surround sound of who you're for, that top level value messaging, how that really lifts everything else you're doing. And it might not. And if it doesn't, that means it didn't work. That just means you didn't do it right. Like keep trying, get those little wins in, and then grow from there. That is the approach that we took at Smartsheet. And we went from small market advertising to full country advertising. And it did have a pretty good impact.
Now, were you able to have very direct conversations with the Smartsheet CEO at the time to help illustrate how under quote unquote powered the team, the budget might have been, and what you wanted to grow into? And perhaps what did that conversation look like, and what advice do you have for our listeners today there?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good case study. I think there were several things playing into my favor. Number one, I came in working for the CPO, who was very supportive of it as well. Number two, the product was, 12 years old when I joined. So it had been out there for a long time. It had, amongst those who knew of it and used it, an incredible fan base, like super loyal customers. They were willing to go to bat. There was an essence of the brand there that it was kind of this light bulb moment went off once you figured it out. It's also really hard to go and convince somebody to invest, that kind of funding. So my approach was to set up a brand tracker, essentially for a relatively low investment, be able to survey, well, let's see what people think right now. Who's our ideal customer profile? Let's talk to directors and above who are in marketing teams and things like that and see if they've heard of us, if they've heard of our competitors, what are they doing instead? Where do they get influenced from? Do they listen to analysts? Where do they get their news? So we had this baseline benchmark that we did, and that basically showed where we were performing, both aided awareness, unaided awareness, those types of things. And that in and of itself was eye-opening. It was a pretty good sample size to realize that top of mind, we weren't where we wanted to be. And so it was like, okay, now we know the benchmark. Let's do some testing. And then we started to increase the different, kind of vary the ways that we were trying to reach folks, the messages we were trying to bring, kind of that reach and frequency, old school media type things. And it really moved the needle on both the demand gen team, who said, hey, we're seeing an impact in these markets where you're testing, but also on our tracker to be able to say, like, we moved from below 20% unaided awareness to over 60% unaided awareness in 4 years, which was incredible. And that was a lot of different things that we did, events, and we did these in-market events. And we actually had at our largest customer conference, somebody stand up to the general question microphone and say, thank you for advertising, because now when I try to evangelize this across my company and get other people to adopt it, they know who you are.
Right.
So it's a little bit anecdotal. We also, and we could talk about this next topic for a while, but it's the importance of internal education. I spent as much time internally in rallying the team around the brand as you do externally. For that advertising, when we launched it, we got the field involved. We said, hey, if you see advertising in the wild, let us know. If your customers mention it, let us know. So we kind of got this groundswell of excitement internally from our frontline sellers, who were really happy to have that air coverage as well. We had different variations of logos all over the place. So we did this, like, deputize people to report when they found an old logo somewhere else and to share us where it was. So if you get the internal team involved into why it's important, why consistent brand is important, you make it fun, you educate them, and you involve them. Like, brand is not just my job. It's the job of every single person in the company.
I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, boots on the ground. I want to go back for just a second. You said, this whole conversation is so interesting to me. But as you were talking about the brand lift that you had from 20% to 60%, if I'm a CEO, I'm thinking, okay, we've got to maintain that trajectory. How are you going to do it? How do you educate the board, the CEO at that moment in time and understanding, okay, it's unlikely we're going to get to 100%.
Yeah.
The goal is X percent. And then how do you augment once you get to those additional 10 points? What do you do to augment?
And to be clear, like those numbers were around a certain target, right? Like you can't move the needle with everybody. And this is marketing 101. Like who are you trying to get to first, right? So we had 3 different audiences we were focusing on: investor audiences, right? Employment, and then kind of our basic customer types, and even within customer types. So that was among certain buyer types. So it's kind of like, hey, we got them, they're leading edge. How do we bring it up against different ICPs? So there's always room to grow. And then it's the awareness, and then you can start to work on the value, right? So getting your name out there, like, yeah, I've heard of it, but I don't really know what to think about it. That's just step 1. So there's so much opportunity. I mean, Coca-Cola is still advertising, right? So there's something to be said there. It's not just the name. You want them to associate you positively with the value that you bring, with the impact that you have on their day-to-day lives in terms of the work you're trying to do or whatever solution you solve for them. And you want them to be able to say who you are to other people, right? To get that word of mouth, to be loyal. So there's all kinds of plays, and there's metrics within that brand tracker that would be like, okay, we've got the awareness. So let's think about value. Let's think about competitive positioning. There's ways that you can continue to deepen that strength of awareness beyond just the I know your name.
Yeah. And this is great because you have this philosophy around customer breaks all ties that really ties into a lot of what you're talking about right now.
Yes.
Where did this concept come from?
Well, that ingrained very deeply early on, even my very first job out of college, where, everything was rooted in customer insight. We go to the grocery store and we go into the paper towel aisle, and you're like, do I get Bounty? Do I get Brawny? Do I get Viva? Like the amount of insight that goes into the customer research that went in when I was leading that brand, even what pattern you develop, it's all based on customer input. What's trending in kitchens right now, those types of things. I like to take examples outside of SaaS because I think it's important to think about how that works. All the way through Coca-Cola, a big part of my job at Coca-Cola was helping to understand local market trends. There's some markets where Coca-Cola is not the number 1 brand by far. Maybe it's Fanta, or maybe it's something else, right? So even though it's part of the Coca-Cola portfolio, so understanding how consumers behave differently, what market they're in, how they use your product, was ingrained in me from the very beginning. And so it's just part of my DNA. I want to know what customers think, and I want to know what customers do. And again, so I focus groups, things that come through from the CPG world, where it's really important to listen to what people say, or even, P&G has this thing where they actually go along and they follow the customer for a day, and they see how they behave, and they see where they observe their pain points. They don't even ask them questions. They just watch them, right? There's so many amazing products that have been developed with that approach. For B2B SaaS, one of the things that I think we have this opportunity is around product advisory councils, customer advisory boards, and then as a marketer, the marketing advisory council. So a lot of times if you have a pack, it's like like 99% of the agenda is all about the product, as it should be. These are your users, are going to tell you, what value they have. And maybe marketing gets a little segment at the end. And you might be able to ask a few questions. And so when I was at Smartsheet, I was like, why don't we have our own marketing advisory council? There's always these customers who want to talk about your marketing.
That's
They
a
want
great
to talk
idea.
about your messaging. They want to tell you, they want to say in their own words why they love you. Like there's nothing stopping you as a marketer from forming your own marketing advisory council, getting those fans, sometimes not the fans, and say, like, we want to present with you our latest ads, or we want to tell you about how we're thinking about these places where we want to advertise or show up. They'll give you their honest opinion, and you'll get it in layman's terms. So you'll lose the jargon. You'll get the humans speak about how they talk about your product. And it's very engaging and loyalty building for them that you are asking their opinion. So you're both getting what you need, and you're creating even more loyalty around those customers. Every marketer should have a map, because why wait for scraps at the product advisory council or customer advisory board meeting? Just build your own.
Yeah, I love that idea. That's going to be a great takeaway for me with this show, by the way.
There you go.
Another thing that I think is really interesting here regarding customer insights is a lot of brands will go through a segmentation study or, focus groups. They've got great insights, but they've got the insight and then they run and don't go back to continuing that insight. They don't have that continuum of gaining additional insights along the way. How have you set up programs where you just don't gain the insight, set it and leave it, and then go on and never come back to it? How do you gain the additional insights needed to evolve?
So I think there's old school and now there's new school, right?
Yeah.
Old school is you'd have to just have that discipline. I had great strategy folks that worked for me at Smartsheet, at the strategy lead at Typeform. I always feel like and I'm the strategy, marketing strategy lead at LiveRamp right now. And I think having somebody who's thinking about that from a pure insight perspective, and then not just insight, but what action we take about it, that has the experience to know how to then infuse that across the organization, is the first step. And if it's somebody's job to do it, then it will happen.
Yeah.
If it's a side hustle or a side quest for someone, like, hey, run this segmentation study, it's a one-time thing, we do something with it, and then I go back to my regularly scheduled programming. It has to be on somebody's goals to continue to update that. It doesn't have to be complicated. Now, in this world of AI and being able to collect information and then do something with it that can be more scalable or long-lived, I guess, is a whole new ballgame. I'm keeping my eyes on a couple of companies that, to me, are doing it right, in the sense of, how do we take real-time customer interviews and really understand what people are thinking that are in our target audience, and then turn that into almost like a research database, an inside database that you can query at any time to get sort of that feedback that AI would predict that they may come up with. I think some of those things are going to be really game-changing for product marketers, for demand gen marketers, for field marketers, to be able to, in an economical way, get some of those insights. You still should test them with real life people, but I think that there's some real unlock moments that are going to be happening in that area.
I agree. And capitalizing on the low-hanging fruit as well, reviews. A huge deal. And we built a custom GPT, which we're going to be releasing to the market,
Nice.
by the way.
Yeah.
That actually takes, we have a customer, they were having seemingly a pricing issue. So we thought, okay, one of the number one things customers like to talk about is pricing. So we gathered 14,000 different customer insights through review sites and several different review sites, brought the GPT together, and we're able to go in and ask it, okay, how many times did someone mention the word price or cost? We analyzed that. It brought all of the comments up. We analyzed that. And then we just dove deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into it, and really trying to understand, okay, is it a problem 3 years ago or is it a problem today? So we put timestamps on everything. And now the GPT goes out every other week and just pulls in the updated reviews. That is one way to.
Fantastic.
It is, isn't it? And by the way, we're having a custom GPT built, a second one internally, that's going to do the same thing for the competitors of your brands.
Yes.
So those are great ways that you can still gain those customer insights and not feel as though you've got to, release a 6-digit segmentation study to get
Yes.
there.
Yeah. And I think, I have lots of areas I love to focus, but market research is one of them that I've had an opportunity to lead a lot of projects over the year, and I really enjoy the discipline. And a lot of times you do qualitative before you do quantitative, because you want to get a little bit of that color before you shape your survey. I feel like that what you're just talking about is such a gift way to say, like, qualitatively, what is out there already?
Right.
What
Exactly.
can we leverage and pull in, and then then the validation stage is maybe the last 10%, the fit and finish of, we found this insight. Let's make sure that we test it or talk to a few of our important, our marketing advisory council, whoever that may be, about our findings before we take action, and then take action. So I'm not quite ready yet to take action without the human in the loop piece, but I do love that so much of that time, that insight can be time compressed and also scaled. If you've got 14,000 data points on something, why wouldn't you use it? I think as companies realize the data sets that they already have available to them, whether that be in community conversations, maybe they host a community, or, requests that come in, service requests that come in, or tickets that get opened by their customers, depending upon the product you have, conversations your salespeople are having with prospects before they close, or your customer success team is having with current customers. Those are all insights that in the past were very hard to collate and then pull insights from that you could act on. And it's just, I'm so excited about the shift that's made possible by using AI. Again, human in the loop. You have to watch out for bias, especially confirmation bias, but other things like that. So I think that's fantastic that you're developing that. I can't wait to see it.
I know. Well, hopefully you'll download it.
Yeah.
No, we invested very, very early in AI with the team, and we've had an AI council in the agency for about 4 years now. And of course,
Great.
we were using AI for many years. We just didn't know it. Well, of course we knew it, but a
Yeah.
lot of people didn't know it through a lot of media buying or Facebook, those
Yeah.
sort of algorithms. Yeah, it's a real interest point. It should be for every marketer today. We are at the end of our discussion.
Oh, already.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I know. We go on and on and on and on. At the beginning of this year, we launched a program that I'm really excited about. It's referred to as the Better At series. And it's really, the intent is to help marketers take each week or each month an everyday skill that they can get better at in order to really, really build stronger marketing teams around them, communicate better, really share the word, on how people can really become better. That's what this whole show has been about today too. What's one thing you've learned to be better at that's really made a measurable difference in how you lead, work, and show up in your role?
Oh, that's a tough question.
Uh-huh.
I'm always looking to be better. And one of the things that has really been a game changer, and I know this is sort of cliche at the moment, but it is really how I can leverage AI. And I realized that I was an early adopter and that I need to bring people along. So part of what I'm doing now, part of my role at LiveRamp, is to bring along the marketing organization to increase their literacy, not just about these little use cases and how to use it, but like the why, like what is it? What is it about? What is an LLM? Like, I think understanding the foundations behind what you're doing versus just putting something in and getting an answer out will make you a better consumer of that output, and understand where the opportunities to improve and the challenges may lie with what you get. So I think for me, taking what I've internalized over the last several years as an early adopter and bringing that to the team is a big part of what I'm doing, and helping them learn how to use it themselves, not only just individually, but like across the team. And how do we do that as a workflow and elevate our use of that as a team?
Yeah. AI early adoption understanding. I mean,
Yep.
it's really key. Karrie, I'm sad to say goodbye to you. We could we just need 2 more hours.
There you go. I'm happy to come back if there's another topic that you want to
Well,
talk about.
We're
Yes.
definitely going to do that.
Yeah.
We'll schedule you again. Before we leave today, what is the best way for our audience to get in contact with you?
Yes, you can find me on LinkedIn, Karrie Sanderson. I'd love to hear from folks. Feel free to DM me or comment when we post this, because I'm sure we will. So thank you, Lori. I really, really appreciate it. Great conversation today.
Well, thank you. And if you'd like to get a hold of me, you can email me, Lori, Lori, at StrategyCast.com. Karrie, thank you so much for your appearance on StrategyCast.
Thank you, Lori.
That's a wrap. Thanks for joining us on today's show. We hope your strategic brains are spinning with new ideas and bold inspiration that will elevate your strategies and marketing know-how.